Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. Today, I'm joined by Neil Goldberg, who is joining us from somewhere near the great city of New York City at his game store, which you're going to be surprised to hear Neil actually started his life as a television producer, and we're going to get to hear a little bit about his journey from television producer to owner of a game store. Neil, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Well, Neil, I'd love to start first with, why don't you tell us about your life before you became a business owner?
Okay. I did exactly what I wanted to do out of college. All I ever wanted to do was cover sports in New York City. And I went to college. I did everything in college to prepare for that. I wrote for the college newspaper, everything like that. And I got very lucky. I got an internship while in college. And about a year out of college, they converted that into a full-time job. And that was the only job I ever had. And I was there for almost 20 years. I was a sports producer at a TV station called New York One News, which is like many cities have like the 24-hour cable news channel that a lot of cable systems have. They were the very first ones to do that. And I got to cover almost every major New York sporting event and go to it. World Series, Stanley Cup Finals, NBA Finals, football games, Super Bowls, just the day-to-day coverage of sports in New York. New York has 9 professional teams. What do you think about it? It's a lot of news and a lot of things to cover and a lot of fans and a lot of good times and a lot of losing and a lot of anger and a lot of bad teams. I'm a Jets fan. I know depths of sadness most sports fans could not even imagine. But it was a great job. And like I said, I got paid to watch sports on TV and go to games for free. Around 2017, I got laid off, and it was time to start to think about, new chapters. And I'm 47. What am I going to do next?
So just because I'm curious, I want to know, what was the highlight of your television production career, the event, the game, when you think back?
The 2001 World Series, which was about 3 weeks after 9/11. I was at the 4th and 5th game at Yankee Stadium, which was the ones both nights. Anyone who's a Yankees fan, maybe they tie the game on back-to-back home runs 2 nights in a row and win the game in extra innings. And just at that point in time, for people of my age who remember it, to be in a large venue again had some discomfort for a long time in New York. And to do that and just to just be part of that. And there were just great nights of story and journal, all the things that I love covering sports for. The fandom, the event, the live coverage, being on the air live, pulling players on to our set, which we built at the stadium there live. It was probably the biggest that our show and our station ever was. And, just when I think about that job, those nights there covering that World Series, the thing I think about the most.
So it sounds like the pivot for you, you had an amazing job that you loved and probably would never have left there if it wasn't for getting to a point where you got laid off. So did you think at a time prior to that you might want to be a business owner? Like, what happened in 2017 where you said, hey, I'm not going to go back into this thing that I love. I'm going to do something completely different?
Yeah, it's funny how I think about that, how I got from 1 to 2 to 3. A few things happened. I had a year of severance. That was really nice. And everyone was laid off, but everything that they could have done, that, usually you think of corporations laying people off, just throwing them out like garbage. And there is a little bit of that feeling when that happens to you. But at least for this company, they did as right by me, I think, as good bit. So I had time. And my first thought was, I'm going to just try and, get back into a control room somewhere. But a couple of weeks and months go by, and you say, I'm in my late 40s. This business is very different now than what it was. The internet and social media had completely changed radio and television and news consumption habits on all forms. Regular news, business news, sports news was changing everything. So there weren't, you know, a lot of local news were axing their sports departments. We weren't alone. So there was less places for me to go. And then a couple things other happened. Board games were my other hobby. I always had a lot of board games. A lot of these giant board games behind me were in my basement at the time. Um, and was just walking within Manhattan with my son. I wanted to go to a board game store, buy some board games. And I walked into a business that was doing what my business here does. And from that point on, I started to think, boy, it'd be fun to run a business like that. If you take my other hobby, I'd be my own boss. I would have so much more control over my life. I wouldn't get laid off again in 6 months, which was my big concern of any job that I had, and this time without almost 20 years of the things you build up when you stay at a company a long time, which I didn't expect to have at a new company. And so it just like the little thoughts you get sometimes, and it's just kind of, yeah, open a business, sure. And then you think about it a little more and a little more. Well, if I were to do that, how would I do that? Where would I start? What do I need to know? What can I take that I know already and translate it? What skills? How to plan something, how to run something. A couple days go by and a couple days go by, and then you start to, maybe I should ask my wife what she thinks about this. And that's how it kind of starts.
Interesting. So for you, you didn't grow up dreaming of being an entrepreneur. You wanted to be in sports TV. And so you did
Yeah,
that. And then when you're in this transition period, wondering what's next for you, you walk in this game store and this little seed plants in your head about what would it look like for me to do this? So walk us through, not theoretically of what one would do, but what did you do at that point? Sounds like the first thing was, let me talk to my wife.
right.
How did that go, and where did you go next?
Honey, I've got this great idea to get all these games out of the basement. Remain calm. I started with telling her about it, and the first thing I actually thought of something very practical. Hey, are there 8 of these out on Long Island already? So the first thing I did was to see the way they're doing this business, which is not just a game store where they're selling games. It's a cafe. I'll maybe explain how business works. We sell board games. We have a library of board games that you can play and a million events built around them. And a cafe, coffee, dessert, snacks, and we have a tavern license, so it's beer and wine as well. So I had some thoughts beforehand about opening a game store, but I just thought just a store that sells games, and I said that's not going to work. Um, but I thought what this was, which was very clever and kind of the workaround of retail is dead. You can't just make it opening a retail store. Um, the first thing I did is see, is there any of these around in Long Island? Because that'll end that real quick. And then I did the research and saw that nope, nothing anywhere.
Meaning you saw that there were some game stores there, but nothing where they were creating a place to go that was centered around games.
Correct.
Got it.
Doing that business this way: games, events, food and drink.
Yep.
Nobody had that. There were game stores that sold candy bars out of a box. That was about it. Um, so then I say, okay, so I could open this business on Long Island, and I would have all of Long Island to myself, pretty much. Um, and then the next step is, boy, you must need a lot of money for that. So how would I start to do that? And how much money do I need? And then how do you open a business? Like things, I began to learn in my free time. You create a corporation. Then that corporation can open a bank account. You then put the money in a bank account, and that's how you build a business itself.
How did you figure out how much money you would need for this concept that was brewing in your mind?
I didn't. I kind of guessed. And I asked a few people who I thought might know. They were wrong. It
Well, tell
was
us about that process. Tell us about how you figured out your first guess and then what you
okay.
actually learned in the process.
I started to think, okay, how much would you need to build everything inside of, say, a blank box? How
Yep.
much money would you need to rent it at the beginning? And that was all I came up with out of my own head as a layman of never having owned a business before. You gotta rent it, you gotta build it, and you gotta buy everything that you're gonna put in it. I think anybody can figure that out.
Yeah.
So it's like when you want to do renovations in your home and you bring in a contractor and you show him what you want him to do. And that moment where he gives you the price, you never know what he's going to say. It could be anything, really. I mean, have you ever been guessed? Said, how many times have you had it? It's like way more money than you thought it was going to be. Um, so I guess that's where I started. I kind of guessed at a number, and it was wrong, not
And
incredibly wrong, but it was too low. You wanted a number? It was, I guess, $175,000.
that's what you guessed. And you
That's what
based
I
that
guessed.
on talking to who?
A couple people who. Here's what actually I started to do. This was, I'm sorry, I kind of blanked on this. I looked up small business classes, and I went to they had the Small Business Administration had a seminar at a local community college.
Okay.
And I went to that, and they were the ones that kind of explained you create an entity. There's either something called an LLC or an S corp or a C corp, and ask your accountant which one is best for you, and that kind of thing. So that's where I learned that, and I kind of went to them and showed them. Do you think this would be enough money? And they kind of went, yeah, I think so. Which led me to believe, in retrospect, they might know a lot about businesses, but have probably never owned one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned pretty quickly. It was a little light.
So you thought your guess was $175,000 for everything. So for the building out of the space, for the
Building a
games,
space,
for the licenses you'd need for the alcohol or whatever that you're going to serve there.
right?
And
That was my
how off were you, Neil?
probably half. I was
Meaning
probably meaning if it was 50% light, probably
50%.
need closer to 300 to 350,
Got it.
and that depending on where you are, your level of experience. If you are inexperienced in this, then things will cost more because you just learn things you can do that you will not know until you've done it the first time.
Well, tell
Um,
us a little bit about the journey of figuring out how you were going to fund that and then what you did when the price tag came in a lot higher than you were expecting.
so two things. First thing I did was like, oh well, I assume everybody just takes out a business loan, and that's a pretty common thing. And I went to a bank and said, hey, do you guys do business loans? Like you might ask if you walk to a bank and said, hey, can you tell me about your home loans or your car loans?
Yep.
And they were like, well, we kind of don't give business loans unless you previously owned a business, at least the bank that I went to. And you start to think, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense, although that doesn't seem fair. How do you start a business
Yeah, if they'll
if
only
you
give it to you
can't?
once you've done it.
Right. I learned later you can go to the Small Business Administration and they have small business loans for first time business owners. Um, I talked to my financial advisor and said, what is your financial advice? And actually, he was the one that first mentioned to me a Rob's rollover that he had heard
Really?
about.
Okay.
Yeah. And that he said, hey, you have a decent amount of money in your retirement fund that you have for the 20 years. Why, and that's all he knew about it, that it was like a thing that existed. And I
Yeah,
think that's how I heard about your company, was that
yeah.
he kind of Googled a bunch.
Can I stop you there for a second to appreciate,
Sure.
Neil, how rare that is? Because that is your financial advisor who's saying, hey, you might want to use these funds, the funds that he gets paid to manage on your
Yeah.
behalf. That's a that's a big deal.
I
You got
think about that,
a
that
good one.
maybe like 5 seconds after he said that, he went, ooh, and it's just like, oh, I know something, let me say it. Um, but I trust my financial advisor. He trusts me that him and other people in his business have been with my family for a very long time.
Yeah.
So I think there's a level of trust and respect there that I appreciate.
Yeah. Sounds like it's well earned.
So that was when I first heard about it, and I began researching that. Um, because obviously, if you can self fund versus a loan, it's so much less stress on the business.
You mean from
Um,
a cash flow standpoint?
yes,
Yeah.
and this is what I was doing, reading and learning about things that you would probably learn in your first year at business school, cash flow and things like that, and how a business feeds itself and either prospers or fails.
So your financial advisor mentions rollovers for business startup. You do some research on that. Then what?
Then I started calling them and kind of understand what that is, how it works, what the risks are. Nobody likes to take their retirement money and do something risky with it. That's the whole point of it, is to not do that. Um, but I started to think, if you want the business to be successful, you have to do things that help the business and might put yourself at a little bit of risk, but is overall less of a risk than a business loan. That even though they say, "Oh, it's a business loan, it's a business," for those you're signing over your house. You're using that usually as a guarantee, and that's very risky. And at least in my point in my life, that wasn't something I really felt comfortable with.
So you opted for the rollover versus using some type of SBA debt financing. Did you start that process immediately at that point? Like what was the
Um,
next stage in your journey?
then the next step was trying to get everything together. Like, how would I do this? What do I physically have to do, or is it a higher what order do I do them in?
Yeah.
How do I rent a space? Like how much is it going to be? Where do I want to go? Um, where should I put this business? Like, I wanted to understand, if I'm going to do this and start appropriating the funds for it, you
Yep.
know, where is it going to be successful? How much?
So yeah, so you feel like you've got a high level solution for how you would fund it lined up. Now, it
Right.
sounds like the next big problem you're trying to solve is where? Like, what's the right location and how to think about that? So, walk us through the process of what you researched, what you did, who you worked with to find your place.
Yeah. The two things I thought. One, I would make the business small. I wasn't going to get a huge place, and because again, less stress. I might not get make as much money in it, but it would be a more limited thing. So I thought, okay, small place, not in the best neighborhood, not in the worst neighborhood, but what's like a convenient middle of the road neighborhood. And it became as simple as driving over there and walking around the town and going, would this business work here? Well, are there any empty storefronts that look really good? Um, so the first place we found was not this place, was in a different town called Farmingdale. Um, and after about a month of talking with them and saying you have the place, they changed their mind on me. So I immediately was back to square one with a couple months wasted.
Was that because you were a first time business owner and they just didn't feel comfortable with the concept, or what was the
Yeah, I
reason?
mean, it was a couple things. I mean, it's weird stuff. First, it was they were willing to split a very large space into two spaces, and then they changed their mind
Got it.
once I was kind of in negotiations with them, and they had said, okay, where you've got the space, let's draw up the lease. Um, so I actually angrily came over to this town where we are now to stomp around, and for whatever reason, this space I had not noticed was vacant, and it was perfect. And I thought, oh, well, the rent is going to be like, no way. And I called up my real estate broker, and he's like, haven't heard of that place. And I said, that's too bad because the sign is for your brokerage firm that's in the window. And he's like, oh wait, hang on. And he's like, oh yeah, I think I get it. And actually, the rent was not that much more money, a little
And
more.
what you were looking for.
And this is a much better town, just like a higher income town, a little less convenient, but a place a lot of people like to go. It's got a lot of restaurants and such.
Yeah.
Um,
So you get the financing
so
lined up, you find the place, then what?
right then, I think and it may not be in exact order. I had guidance, then I kind of signed on with them, with you, and had you guys begin to create the entity.
Got it.
So I could then load money into a bank account and start writing checks. Um, so that was the next step. With some back and forth of lease negotiation and that to try and get a little better things that, in my inexperience, you wouldn't even think to ask for, but now I would. So I feel I
Oh,
got
like
a
what?
little.
Those are great things to get out for
Yeah,
the
well, these are
audience.
important things you should always ask for. All right, you're taking over a space. It takes months to get it going. You should ask for rent abatement that you're not paying rent till your business is open.
How many months did you have to pay rent before you were actually able to bring customers in the door?
Um, I got an abatement. My own inexperience made this much longer than it did. From the day I signed the lease to the day I opened the business was 9 months,
Oh, wow.
which is a lot.
It's a long time, yeah.
And I was paying rent for about 3 months of that. And
What
that is
were what were the mistakes in that 9 month journey that you made that made it long? How much of it was, what I'm trying to understand is how much of this
right.
was licensing issues versus you had
It
issues with
is. It was
construction,
100% permitting issues.
permitting.
And
Okay, so what about that?
here's if you take nothing from this, this is what I'm going to tell you. This is the mistake I made. So I was going to open in Farmingdale, the original town.
Yep.
I called the guy who had done some renovations on my home and said, "You guys build businesses?" He goes, "Sure." I said, "Oh, I'm going to build a business in Farmingdale." He goes, "That's great. And I've got a great architect and permit person in Farmingdale. Let's go over there." And I met them, and they were the Farmingdale architect and permit people. If you opened a place in Farmingdale, they did the plans, they got you open with the town, got all your permits. And here's just an awful mistake I made when we said, all right, well, this is not going to be in Farmingdale. It's going to be in a town called Huntington. Can you guys do it there? They said, sure. No, they were not sure. That's kind of the way these towns work. The town has a guy. You got to find that guy and have him or her do your permits and plans. You cannot do them. You think you can fill out a permit thing for a town? No, you can't.
Well, it
Any
sounds like
kind,
you can. It just creates a significant delay, or did you have to fire
correct.
the
That's
original
how
people?
these work. A couple things. You have to follow up with them a lot, and because they were 20 minutes away rather than walking distance to the planning office, they did not follow up. They did not keep saying, "Hey, do you need anything? What's going on? Can we get this one going? Is there a problem?" It just sat on a desk endlessly. So I tell people, you find a planning person, an architect that is walking distance from the town's office. If they're not walking distance from the town's office, they're not the town's people.
Yeah.
And finding it may be a few, doesn't have to just be one, but in any instance of getting your building permit, the permit that allows you to construct and open the business, which is the most important thing, you have to find the person who is the expert at doing that in that town.
Yeah. And probably that's especially true in areas like you're out in New York or maybe even in California where there are some significant regulations and things that have to be
Oh
met.
yeah, I finally said, well, let me just call a local town attorney, and I called it, and within a week everything was fixed. But in that period of time, I wasted 4 months.
Yeah. So you ended up having to pay rent for a number of months when you weren't
Yes,
able to use the location.
correct, and that is as rookie a mistake as you can make. At what I would recommend is in your lease, you should try to ask for, "I'm not paying rent till the business is open," and then maybe they'll say, "Well, can we put some kind of time limit on that? That is an extensive time limit, so you don't, sometimes they call that a sundown clause. Like if nothing's happening for an extensive period of time, we walk away." But I think as a business owner, the stresses of owning the rents that you pay, I don't think you are out of bounds to say, "I don't want to pay rent till the business is open," and,
So,
and revenue.
so Neil, anything else to mention about that time frame of the 9 months in terms of what you did or things that you
I
learned
mean,
during that?
like I said, I've learned people that I hired to do things did them. In instances where I tried to do it, didn't go as well. I hired a company to do they have them in New York. I don't know. Different states have different things. In New York, you can get something called a tavern license. So it's
Yeah.
just beer and wine, but not full liquor. And those are much cheaper and much easier to get. And I found a company that's all they do is liquor licenses, and they were great. And I got the liquor license before I got the building permit, which was insanity. And they said they had actually never ever seen before. Um,
Any other providers that are worth mentioning, Neil? Either ones that you ended up hiring and so the process went really fast and really well, or ones that you didn't hire right away and was painful, like you mentioned with the architects
I
and
mean, it's just the myriad of things that you don't even realize that you need. You need a permit for a sign. You need a permit to hook into the sewage. If you're going to have food, you need a food permit. All of these things, first of all, add cost, add time. If not done well, add delay. And one of the things you need to learn as you do is like make sure you have all this stuff, because if you miss one and it's out of order, it stops the whole process.
yeah.
There's
Now,
a, you know, the
did you work with one company that handled all of those permits and knew the
no,
totality of what you needed
different
to do, or how'd you figure
people,
it out?
like an attorney gets your building permit, but like your contractor will handle with the town the different levels of inspection as the building process goes. Like about at a 50% point in the build, they've got to call the town and have a guy come over and check it out and say, okay, so far so good, you can keep going. If they come in and see you've kind of gone past that 50%, and like this is unique to this town and every town is different and will
Yeah,
have different things. But these are, so your job is to, in your town, figure this stuff out and talk to the contractor and make sure they understand who they're dealing with. There's a plumbing thing. Are you on sewers or are you septic, which can affect your capacity? You have to find that before you even sign the lease. You should have some kind of contractor or permit guy you tell them the address and they kind of tell you, hey, that's on sewage. So that will let you have more people in the place. That's not on sewage. So if that will exacerbate, if it's a food and beverage business, food and beverage businesses create more wastewater. We had a location that we looked at, and the guy said the problem with that is that you can only have 20 seats in there, because if you switch it to food and beverage, because there isn't enough wastewater. I mean, like, these are things that you learn that you have to
yeah.
understand before you sign them. Because once you sign the lease and then they go, oh, by the way, you can't convert that into a food and beverage place. And if you do, you can only have 30% of the people that you thought you could have in there.
Yeah.
You could really be in trouble.
So the two things I heard from you, Neil, based on your experience that you would recommend people do is A, hire local when you're talking about permitting
Yes.
contractors, people who have the fast track and know what needs to get done. You mentioned that sort of as a general overarching guideline as well. Like hire people who are really specialized in what they do, and it will save you massive amounts of time. And then the second thing I heard was try to negotiate some flexibility in your lease around your opening date so you don't end up stuck paying rent but unable to generate revenue. Is there anything else as you think about that, what you learned from failing forward in the 9 months before you were open?
Yeah, as you go through this process, first of all, watch your mental health. When you open a business, everybody comes through the door and wants something and wants you to help them in some way. And obviously, for a lot of them, it's very easy to help them. The PTA wants this and that, but you will get called with all kinds of people who want to do all kinds of things with your business, provide services. To me, it became overwhelming at some point. Um, so just have a good boundaries with people of, if people want to pitch you something for your business, and I'm talking, this is going on while you're building it. Oh, someone shows up one day and says, I want to paint murals on your wall so your place will look great. And things like that. And it to me, I remember as we're building it, it became very overwhelming to me for a while of learning how to say no to a lot of people and a lot of things and a lot of pitches and a lot of solicitation. But but also trying to think, hey, I don't know what I don't know. Maybe this person has a good idea. Um,
You mentioned it as a mental health protection issue. So maybe you could talk about your personal experience. Like what happened for you and how did you sort of address it or get over it?
I mean, I was used to a very high stress job. I had a clock counting down to a show that was starting, and you better have something good. And there were nights where I was worried were not. So I was used to the stress, but there's like, this is a financial stress because you have money in a bank account. And from the beginning that you start building this business to the point where you open and start getting revenue, it goes in one direction, and that is down. And there are times where it reaches a point I was like, I don't think I'm going to get this place open in time before it hits zero. And, you have to say, well, now I've got to kind of, where can I get some more money and things like that. And that's not fun. And I think every business goes through that. And I talk to, when we go to the convention of game store owners, everybody's been through that period of time, that first year that you even are open, but nobody knows you're alive yet. So you're really not at your, you know, furthest built out revenue. And it's tough. And, um, yeah, the closest thing you could, I think, to have is that like first year when you have a child and you have a baby and it's a 24-hour
Yeah.
thing that you worry and it's just hours and being up and down and everything that you used to do that you don't have the time to do anymore and the physical grind that it can be. That's when I did this. My kids were already in their teens, so I remember thinking that first building the business the first year, that's what it felt like on the
Yeah.
day to day. Because there's always something the business needs.
Yep.
And it's something you have to do. And I have to go there and I have to do this. I have to call this person. I have to pick this up and get that and be here to meet this guy and that guy. Um, it's, it's hard, but it's a way of life, but it has benefits. I can't tell you the difference having worked for a large corporation and having bosses, and some of them not necessarily having your career or best interest in mind, to be your own boss. And even in the bad days, um, it still was worth it. I kind of said a lot of
Yeah.
tough things and doom and gloom, and I think I'm doing this for so people know and maybe not make the mistakes and have a smoother time and can learn and
Yeah.
benefit from it. A lot of people help me, and I'd always say, "Oh, I didn't know I was doing this, and I didn't know I was doing that." There's a lot of things people did tell me, "Hey, whatever you do, make sure you do this," and I did it. And some disaster that could have happened did not happen.
The analogy to parenting is interesting, not just because of all the things you said, but also that first child that you have, there's this, anytime something happens, this lack of confidence because you've never dealt with it before. This fear of, I might be doing this wrong. Am I going to screw this up forever? Well, Neil, I'd love to circle back on something you said earlier. You said, I can't describe the difference between being in the corporate world and then being your own boss. I'd love for you to take a stab at that just because you are someone who so loved what you were doing as your job. And yet you seem to be saying there are aspects of what you're doing now that you wouldn't trade even to go back to that. So maybe you could speak to how that's evolved for you.
Um, it's just a completely different world, and we were not the most like we're this corporate button down place. There was, we sat around watching sports all night and throwing things at televisions, but there was a way they were going to do things, and even if you thought you had a better idea and a better way to do it, the odds of it getting to something that would actually affect change was almost zero, because it had to go through seven people, and one of them, either for spite or not caring or not understanding what you're talking about, was going to say no. And even when it came to issues of just general modernization, like I went to them and said, "Hey, we should do a podcast." And three of them were like, "What's a podcast?" And eventually they were like, no, because we're a cable company and people pay for cable and podcasts are free, so we can't do it. So that's the thing. At this business, when I have an idea for something, it may not be the best idea, but I'd like to try it. And if it works, it'll benefit me, it'll benefit the business. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. On to the next thing. And that's
Yeah.
just such a different mental way to see your day. And the things that make any biz job fun, the ability to affect change positively with a good idea. If that's not there, I don't care how much free sports you're watching on TV. It's tough, and you start to feel not seen. You start to feel like, well, no one cares if I do a good or a bad job, which is not a good spot to be in.
Yeah.
So that's like the most important thing is like, if I have a good idea, I'm going to try it now. And having gone through something where like that was never going to happen is just such a big difference.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Neil, are there any other ways in which being a business owner has changed you? I mean, you've been at this for what, 7 or 8 years?
Yeah. 20, we opened in 2019. So the business
Okay.
is
About
five and a
5 years.
half years of operating. I feel like I just have more control of the day to day. I spent the last few years at my job expecting to be laid off at some point. Like this was going to end. I used to joke with my boss, who was there with me almost the entire time and was not that much older than me, that like I said, we're going to be like Waldorf and Stadler. We're going to be the two old guys up in the balcony here laughing at everybody. And, you know, for me, it's just, it's allowed me to do things I could never do. It's allowed me to give advice to people about things in their careers. It's allowed me to meet so many people at our convention who do this business and have been through this exact thing from all over the country. Um, I talk about going into the board game store in Manhattan that time that gave me the idea for this, meeting their owners and becoming friends with them. And now we talk all the time about this is working, this is not working. Hey, let's try this. Hey, let's try that. Um, it's opened up this whole world. I love board games, and I think they're such an important tool in life for to be able with your friends, with your family, to put your phones down for a while and play an analog board game. I'm a sports person. I trash around on my phone as much as anybody. But I think for my kids and myself, it's such an important skill to say, I'm going to put my phone down and not just say, hey, put your phone down, but to be able to bring something to my family, my friends, and say, and let's do this. And we're not going to be staring at our phones. We're going to look at each other and talk to each other and play a fun board game and have that great core memories. I'm sure every family, everybody in it has some great board game memory in their life when they were kids or as parents. And just be able to like share that with our community and create a space in our community where people can come and do that. That's how it's changed me, that I could do something like that. And after
Yeah.
so long, enjoying what I was doing, being proud of what I was doing, but kind of nobody caring that I was doing it, to be able to do something like this and be seen a little bit, honestly, um, and be someone in community who was through a business positively, I think, affected some change. That's been the best part and how that has made me feel.
Yeah. That's great. So Neil, let's step back to took you 9 months to get open. You opened your doors. Then what? Did things go exactly as you expected? What worked? What didn't work?
I learned a lot of things pretty quickly. Learned we were not charging enough money for literally anything, and that was something not just in revenue projection, but people telling me, "Hey, this place is great. It's so cheap," and I kind of realized, hey, the experience that we have here has value. That's actually something I talk to a lot about other people opening board games. Is you got to understand the value you're providing and charge an appropriate amount for that. Um, I learned I was way overstaffed and had hired probably too many people and that was actually something pretty difficult. It was pretty early on. We had to cut hours, and that was
Yeah.
not that anybody was doing anything wrong. It's just we didn't need that many people. Um, and it's tough because you want to open a lot because you need to see, hey, what hours are people coming? Well, they can't come if you're not open.
Yep.
So we realized pretty quickly on we were open too early. And within a couple of months, we cut our hours. But within a couple of weeks, we realized we had too many people on staff for the amount of people that we were getting in.
Yeah.
So a couple of people quit pretty quickly because they were like, not that I don't like it here, but just there's not, I need a certain amount of hours to want to work at this place. So that was the immediate thing, but we were immediately popular. I mean, we hit it in terms of being full on the weekends, being full during all prime hours. We got a lot of great news coverage. People had not heard of this concept and immediately received it positively. The store next door is a hairdresser, and within a week, one day he just walked. He goes, "Holy cow, that place is full all the time," and that was actually pretty cool. Because I'd been here a lot with talking, kind of commiserating with him as I couldn't, standing in an empty place that was not open yet. So that was the first thing. And also something I would learn now is you have interesting. This is a little more advanced. You need to understand when is the best window for your business to open. When is your business going to be have its most powerful times? Every business has its high season and low season. And for us, we were at a point where we'll just got to get open. We'll open any day of the week. But a lot of businesses I've learned say, if I can't get open for a certain window, I'm not going to open till another window emerges. So that for you might be at the beginning of the summer. Or at the beginning. For this business, I would, like I said, if I knew it again, I might have waited another month, even paying rent to open.
Why is that?
Because those months of May are not great months for retail and people going out.
Interesting. So what have you learned about both the time to be open during the day and the seasons to be open?
Well, your time to be open during the day is dependent on where you are and your community.
Yeah. What about you?
Can you get a good lunch business if you're, say, a restaurant, or was your business going to be solely focused on dinner? Something like that. So you say, oh, do I need to be open at 11 a.m. or can I wait to open, some places 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock? Like for us, the spring can be a little light. We're always helped by opposite weather, if you think about that.
Okay.
In the summer when it's raining, we have a great day. In the winter, when it's a warm day, we have a great day. Whenever the weather is opposite, for whatever reason, in the middle of the week, we'll fill up.
Interesting.
Now, we can't control the weather, so there's nothing really I can do about that. It's just one of those things.
One of the things you've learned.
But for any retail business, you'll do better in the summer and you'll do better in the holidays. So if the window, so let's say you're building your business and you start to realize, okay, I think this thing will be done in late September. Maybe you wait till November to open, right before Black Friday. You might save them.
For your business, the holidays.
Yeah,
and the summer.
Yeah, the holidays and the start of summer. So the summer and the holidays are our best time of year.
Got it.
No school in the summer, hot day. People gotta want to get out, play some board games. Kids aren't going to camp, or not that day, and we got to do something with them. And then the holidays, where just people run and buy armloads of board games and run out the door.
Yeah.
That is when we really have our best months.
Let's go back and talk about pricing, because I think
Sure.
this is something that's really hard for people when they start a business. So how did you decide where to start with your pricing? And then what did you learn and how did you evolve it as you were getting this feedback from customers?
So the first thing I did, I just matched the city prices to say for the events. So I
What do
knew
you
what
mean?
they were charging, the board game cafes in New York City.
Okay, got it.
So I knew what they were charging, so I said I'll charge the same thing. The food prices, for whatever reason, I just underpriced. I don't know why that was just kind of inexperience and understand what I was paying the food, what I was
What your cost
buying.
was.
Let's say, pick a food, mozzarella sticks.
Yeah.
How much is a box of mozzarella sticks? How many mozzarella sticks are in the box? How many mozzarella sticks are we putting in a portion? And what are we charging for that? And what is the ancillary cost of the little piece of paper that goes on the tray and the little cup of tomato sauce that goes with it?
Yeah.
What did that cost us to make? And so then what is the appropriate markup for what we would charge? So most thought is prepared food items, I've learned now, is usually times three.
Got it. So you feel like you priced the board game stuff accurately. It's the food
Yeah,
where you dramatically underpriced, and now you've sort of learned this rule of three. If it costs me $3 to buy and create this thing, then I need to charge nine.
correct.
Yeah.
That was something that I learned once I started actually making it. And again, helpful people kind of, pointed these things out. Even the person who we were buying the food from was like, hey, this here, let me show you, this is the best way to do it. And
Yeah.
it's the things you learn as you do something that you've never done before. So
Yeah.
you've got to be real receptive. You can't take it personally when someone says, hey, I think you're doing this wrong. If you trust them, it's hard. It's a hard line when you're doing something for the first time because you don't want to be the one where it's like the most influential person is the person I just spoke to 5 minutes ago. That's a bad habit that you can get into when you're doing something that you don't feel you know a lot about. But also be able to listen and take good, sound, solid advice. Um, so it was little things like that we learned as we go. And the moral of the story is we were not open a year yet, and then COVID happened, and we got shut down.
Well, I want to
So,
stick a pin in the COVID thing and come back
okay.
to it because I want to revisit this, how you got the word out. It sounded like you got some good PR to start. Was there
Yeah.
anything that you did proactively to create that or anything else that you did proactively that helped get people in the door?
Yes, even when we were not open, I created a mailing list. So we had a website. I hired a person to build us a little website that would say, "Hey, this is going to be coming soon." This, um, I put a sign on the window where it said, "Coming soon, Main Street Board Game Cafe." A website. The website you could leave your email and join our mailing list. And eventually, we had about you know about 1,000 people on a mailing list for a business that wasn't open yet, which
And
is pretty
just
good.
from sticking a sign on the door and
So sticking a sign on the door and other socials. What I also started doing was I created a Facebook and Instagram account,
okay.
and every couple of days I would just take a picture of a board game and take the board game and open it up and set it up on a table and take pictures of it and talk about the game a little. Well, this is why I like this game and this is what you do in the game
Yeah.
and it built a little bit of a following. It wasn't the most scintillating social media content you've ever seen, but it was something,
Yeah.
and it built a little bit of a following. And a lot of people drive by this spot. We're in a pretty good spot, and a lot of people walk by it. So I think we got a decent amount of people just seeing and looking at it. And I would send out little email blasts once in a while, and then once we got into construction, hey, look, they're building the counter. Look at that. There's a counter right there. And whoa, look at this. We got some refrigeration equipment arriving. How about that? Um, and building up to our a grand opening.
Yeah. And so did the PR stuff just come as a result of the efforts you
A
made
little
on
bit of that,
central and
because
local?
then the day we opened, Newsday, which is the big Long Island newspaper, sent somebody. The local TV station, we had a couple of them here. It was
Oh
pretty
wow.
good. I didn't like reach out to them or contact them in any way, um, but I think just there was actually a pretty decent word of mouth. It is a very unique business, so it kind of sticks in people's heads that something like this was coming. It's not just another clothing store or a phone store or whatever. Um,
In hindsight, do you think that 9 months actually benefited you because it created this runway of building up this mailing list and some momentum for people to be excited about this new thing that was coming?
yeah, it's funny. My wife went and got lunch at a sandwich place that's around the corner, and I think she was there with her mother, and they were just talking about it. And the woman at the counter over her goes, "Oh, that place? That sign's been up for a year. I don't know when that's opening." So they were like, okay. Um, so I think I think so. It helps. Like I said, I think all the technological stuff there is today. Sometimes just a big sign is the best way to go. Um, but I think pretty quickly we had because we were as soon as we opened that first weekend, we were full for like almost completely for 4 straight days. Because we opened on a Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those were Friday, Saturday, Sunday are big days anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so through those 4 days, we were full, and there was a lot of coverage of us.
So it looks like you had a lot of momentum when you were opening the store. How long did it take you to get to cash flow profitability?
We didn't make it through COVID. We were
Got it. So
not.
you were still building the store up that first year, and then
Yeah,
COVID
we
hit.
were. We weren't cash positive. We were like breaking even.
Okay.
Oh, this week we lost some money. Oh, this week we made some money. Oh, this week we lost some money. It was kind of going back and forth, and it took. And then but I was like, look, that's to be expected. You generally are not going to be cash positive for your first year. You have to budget for that. That's another lesson. Like you need to take a chunk of money and say, I'm not doing anything with this money. This money is going to sit in the bank account and keep the business alive till you're cash positive.
Yep.
Um, and so we didn't reach it. It was like I said, I never felt dire. Couple weeks where I was like, oh boy, if it keeps up like this, because then we had this very. I talk about the windows of opening. We had a great first weekend, but there was a good amount of time in May and June when we didn't have a lot of people in the place most days, especially weekdays. Weekends we were always fine, but it would be like a faucet turning off. We'd have this
Yeah.
huge weekend where we're full, and then you get to Monday and it's like, and maybe a few people come in, but not enough at the staffing that we were at that led to the staffing things that I talked about.
Yeah.
Um, and you as a business owner, you're there almost every hour. You're open every day, 7 days a week. Um, it's a lot. One lucky thing, I don't live far from here. That made a big difference. I think if it was a long commute, that's something to think about. It's one thing to have a job and maybe have a little bit of commute. I did. I had about an hour commute at my old job,
Oh well.
but to go back and forth to this, make sure you're living a comfortable distance because even when you have some free time and you're not there, you can be called there at any moment. And if that means 45 minutes to an hour, that can be rough.
So you opened spring of 2019. You're starting to
Yeah.
build some momentum with the store, and then March of 2020 hits. Sounds
Right.
like you got shut down for a period of time. What did you do? How did you make it through that period?
So the first thing I did was like, well, we have these board games that we can sell. We can't be open, but people can come and pick them up. So I
Okay.
immediately went to our website and created a sales portion of it that looked like any board game online seller. And we said you can buy board games. We'll have a period of time you can come pick them up. And if you order over $50 worth of board games, we'll deliver. So that
Oh,
became my day was taking all the
driving around.
orders in the morning, being open for a period of time to let people come and pick them up, and then after that, driving around to 6 or 7 places and dropping off their board game order. And we didn't make much money doing that, but actually, that really, I think, gave us a lot of publicity. And
How
then
so?
just that people were telling people, oh, there's this place they'll deliver you board games. It was like really strong word of mouth.
And it's not called
That
Amazon?
No, and it's not called Amazon, and right, and they come right to your door that day. None of this Amazon stuff where you have to wait a whole day for the stuff to come. Um, and it was good because people could call me and they'd say, "Hey, I've got an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old and me. What's a good board game for the that all three of us will enjoy?" Um, it it first of all it gave me something to do all day when we were not open, but I think it actually built like a really good like community of people who were buying board games from us. And
Yeah,
then
and what you spoke to within that, Neil, is that you kind of created this space where you were a little bit of a board game guide. Meaning the
Yeah,
thing that you had that they couldn't get just on the random web or somewhere else was somebody who was going to help them uncover or discover something that they might love.
a board game that you is not for you, that you're not going to be able to figure out, is just a big paperweight.
Yeah.
So a big thing for us is we come in as we have people here, me or anyone else who works here, will help you find a board game that your family or your partner, you and your kids will like, that you can play, that you will enjoy, that the kids can understand, that the parent won't feel like they're playing something dull and boring, but that they can enjoy with their kids on their level.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. And once people, I think a lot of people have a little bit of a trepidation of, oh, I'm not going to know how to play this. I'm not going to be able to figure it out. We're like, no, you can. We'll help you figure it out. You'll come here where you play board games out of our library, and one of the board games you really like, and you buy from us, buy one out of the retail section on the way home, and now you know how to play it already. You
Yeah.
played it already.
Test drive.
Yeah. So, but I want to quickly tell a quick story. One of our customers who came to a lot of our um, Magic the Gathering events, they brought their son to our Magic the Gathering events, which is a card game that we have
Yep.
tournaments of. And their son made a lot of friends here. And I guess he had maybe had some trouble making friends, wasn't the most socially comfortable kid, but here made a ton of friends, made a really good friend. They were hanging out. Turns out this guy's got a lot of pretty wealthy, and he calls me up and he says, I'm really worried about your business once it was closed down. He says, I want to give you $5,000 and take $5,000 of inventory off your shelf, drive it over to the hospital and give it away.
Wow.
And I was like, you kidding? He's like, nope, that's what I want to do. So I made a little Facebook Live of it, thanking this, anonymous customer who's doing this. And 5 minutes later, another customer calls me, goes, I want to match that. I'll give you $5,000, take another
Wow.
$5,000 off, and give it away. So we added to our website a hospital board game drive where you could donate 10, 25, 50, $100 of
Yeah.
just inventory, and we're going to take it over to the hospital and give it away, put it on a big table. Doctors, nurses coming off their shift take a board game home as thanks for everything that they were going through. We're not far from a hospital. And I grew up on the noisiest street in Manhattan. I am completely deaf to street noise. You could run a jackhammer outside my window and I would probably sleep through it. But I was sitting here in the first week that we were closed, just like kind of shutting the cafe down for a long term. And I say, there's an ambulance driving by every 5 minutes. You can't help but notice it.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, just to be able to do that and work on that project as well, and let people in our community send the doctors and nurses and such home with a little bit of fun was just, just an amazing thing, and like literally the best thing I've ever worked on.
Yeah.
Driving games over to the hospital 3 or 4 times, just like fill the back of your car, trunk of your car with board games, drive it over and just bring it into their like to the reception area and just let the people coming off shift take it home. That was
Neil,
really
that's such a
cool.
cool story on so many levels. One, the impact that you had on this kid's life who came into your store, right? You're making a difference so much so that the dad then wants to step in and do this amazingly generous thing, both to support your business and allow you to give back. And then your ability to sort of share that with other people and then start to rally some of the community to even further support these, first responders. It's really special.
It's it was such a weird feeling and a weird time because it's a business, it's not a person, so no one is living and dying. But you worked on this thing like it was, and now on top of everything that happens that you go through when you are operating a business first year, you have this pandemic happen, and real people are suffering real life consequences, and real people are dying, and he's like, what are you going to do to be able to do something good within that and say that the business participated in that?
Yeah.
It was such an incredible feeling. And the amount of times I said, real geez, boy, if I could press a button and go back to the day I said I'm gonna do this business and make it like it never happened. There are times when you do this, you are tempted to have done that. And but when you reach a point, you're like, you know what, I did the right thing. All the difficult times and all the ambiguous things to come in the future, I did the right thing. That was it was validating. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you had that button sitting in front of you right now, Neil, and you could press it and it would immediately take you back to what you were doing, producing sports, would you press it? And if so, why or
No,
why not?
little bit of age. That job was took a physical toll, took an emotional toll. I enjoy watching games now and not worrying. All right, how are we going to cover this? What's in place? Boy, if this team wins the game, that's going to be 5 extra days of travel and tough work. But if they lose, I get to go home. It's not a fun way to watch sports. You
Yeah.
want to root for your teams and enjoy it with your family and enjoy the experience of going. Life takes you on an interesting, what life brings interesting choices, and to have things not happen first have them happen. Again, we're talking about life and limb and death here, but the interesting things that happen to you, and then not every day is going to be great. Not everything's going to be perfect. You know, I love the movie The Martian. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with Matt
Matt Damon.
Damon.
Yeah.
And sorry to spoil you, at the end of the day, they save Matt Damon. But there's a scene at the end where he said, "Did I think I was gonna die on Mars?" And he said, "Yes, I did. But I knew all I could do was solve the next problem. And if I
Yeah.
solved enough problems in a row for long enough, I would get to go home." And I always thought of that in the scope of this business and in your life. All you can do is solve the next problem. And there's a lot of problems, very few are unsolvable, completely unsolvable. You just
Yeah.
have to figure out how. And if you're willing to have the mindset of, all I'm going to do is try and just solve the next problem in front of me, and that will let me move on to the next problem, then you have a chance. And then when you get to the end, it will have been worth it.
Yeah. So, speaking of solving the next problem, you've obviously solved a host of them over 5.5 years and gotten to a place where you are comfortable and happy and engaged in what you're doing. I'm curious, Neil, what is the single best or most important piece of advice you would give to somebody who is an aspiring business owner thinking about going down this path?
Just know what you're signing up for and how consuming it can be, and make sure you're ready and willing and have enough passion for what you think the business will be and what your life will be like running it, that you're willing to pay the price, pay the financial price, the emotional price, the physical price. It's worth it. It's 100% worth it. I wouldn't change a thing, but you just have to go in with your eyes wide open. It's when you don't realize what was going to happen that you begin to question yourself and maybe quit. Um, and a lot of this is numbers. A lot of this is, how much money do I have? How much money is this going to cost? What we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
If you do the work and make sure that's right, then you have the best chance for success. And make sure you're passionate about what it is you want to do. I mean, I love board games, and the idea of opening a board game cafe and spend my career teaching and playing board games with people had so much appeal to me. Make sure that core thing of what the business is something that you have passion for, enough passion for.
Yeah. That is a great place to stop, Neil. I just want to reinforce, really appreciate you sharing that special story of getting through COVID. It's clear that you've built something pretty special in a local community where people come together and spend some time not looking at phones and not
Yeah.
scrolling their social media. And I hope you're proud of what you've created there, not far from where you live.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to talk about. It's great to, even the bad times, it's great to relive, because it makes you who you are, and that's what this is all about.
Well, and I think where your story is going to be inspiring, Neil, is for people who are thinking about doing a business, maybe a startup. You came from a place where you didn't know much. I mean, you were starting from the most basics of basics to try and understand how to get something off the ground, and you sort of fumbled your way through a combination of making some mistakes and getting some help from some local people. So it was really inspiring here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Neil. Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.